Ethan Carter stood before his bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. Gone was his perfectly trimmed salt and pepper beard, replaced by 3 days of unkempt stubble. His usually well-styled hair was hidden beneath a warm baseball cap, and his designer suits had been swapped for faded jeans and a leather jacket that had seen better days. The transformation was necessary. After all, no one would believe a supposed motorcycle enthusiast who looked like he just stepped out of a boardroom. The idea had come to him 3 nights ago, during yet another sleepless evening of reviewing quarterly reports for Carter Motorcycles. His pride and joy had shown some concerning patterns in customer satisfaction surveys. It wasn't anything dramatic, just small dips that most owners might overlook. But Ethan hadn't built the largest motorcycle dealership in the Pacific Northwest by ignoring the minor details. "Time to see how the other half lives," he muttered, adjusting the fake prescription glasses that completed his disguise. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd started his business 20 years ago as a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a dream. Now he had to dress down to blend in with the very people he'd once been. The morning air was crisp as Ethan pulled into his dealership's parking lot, not in his usual reserved spot but in the customer area. His heart raced with unexpected nervousness. He'd rehearsed his cover story countless times. Mark Thompson, a software developer who had recently cashed in some stock options and was looking to fulfill his midlife crisis with a high-end motorcycle. Simple, believable, and close enough to his real personality that he could maintain the ruse. The familiar glass doors of Carter Motorcycles slid open, but everything felt different from this angle. The showroom gleamed under strategic lighting, rows of pristine bikes catching the morning sun. The subtle scent of leather and polish filled the air, a detail he'd specifically requested in the store's design. A few early bird customers were already wandering between the displays, their expressions a mix of desire and calculation. "Welcome to Carter Motorcycles." The greeting came from Jessica, one of their newer sales associates. Ethan had reviewed her hiring file but had never directly interacted with her. "Can I help you find anything specific today?" Ethan deliberately hesitated, playing his part. "Just looking for now. Been saving up for this for a while, you know?" He forced his voice into a slightly higher register than his natural tone. "Of course. Feel free to look around. Our newest Ducati Panigale V4 just came in. It's a beauty if you're interested in sport bikes." Jessica's smile was genuine, her knowledge impressive. She didn't hover but remained attentive from a professional distance. For the next hour, Ethan immersed himself in the customer experience. He asked detailed questions about different models, noting how each salesperson responded. Some, like Jessica, showed genuine enthusiasm and knowledge. Others seemed more interested in pushing toward a quick sale. He made mental notes of both approaches, already planning future training sessions. The real test came when he showed interest in a limited edition BMW S1000RR, one of their most expensive models. "Mind if I sit on it?" he asked, deliberately pulling out a slightly worn wallet. The sales manager, Derek, practically materialized beside him. "Of course, sir. Let me just grab the keys to release the security chain." Ethan noticed how Derek's eyes flickered to his worn jacket, a slight frown crossing his face. Interesting. As he straddled the motorcycle, feeling the familiar ergonomics of a bike he'd helped design special modifications for, Ethan engaged in the expected haggling dance. He watched Derek's techniques, noting both the skilled persuasion and the occasional subtle pressure tactics. "Look," Derek leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I shouldn't really say this, but I might be able to work something out with the price. The owner is a real numbers guy." Ethan suppressed a smile at this but said, "I've got some flexibility. What's your budget looking like?" The negotiation continued, and Ethan was genuinely impressed by Derek's skill, even if some of his tactics skirted the edges of the dealership's official policies. He was about to push further, curious how Derek would handle a difficult customer when a snippet of conversation from behind him made his blood run cold. 2 customers had moved closer, their voices barely above a whisper. Under normal circumstances, their words would have been lost in the showroom's ambient noise, but Ethan's heightened awareness of his surroundings, a side effect of maintaining his cover, made their hushed exchange crystal clear. "They say you can get any bike you want for half the price if you know the right guy." "Yeah, but it's got to be off the books. No paperwork, no tracking." Ethan's hands tightened on the BMW's handlebars, his knuckles white beneath his deliberately dirty fingernails. 20 years of building his reputation on ensuring every sale was legitimate, every customer treated fairly, and someone was running a shadow operation right under his nose. He forced himself to remain casual, pretending to adjust the mirrors while straining to hear more. Derek was still talking about financing options, but Ethan barely heard him. His mind raced through possibilities, calculating implications, remembering small discrepancies in inventory that he'd attributed to computer errors. "I'll need to think about it," he heard himself say, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. "Mind if I walk around a bit more? Really want to be sure about such a big investment?" "Of course, sir. Take your time." Derek handed him a business card. "I'm here all day if you have any questions." Ethan nodded slowly, dismounting the BMW. His legs felt lean as he moved away, careful not to look directly at the two customers whose conversation had just shattered his world. But his peripheral vision caught everything: their casual poses, their too careful smiles, the way they seemed to be waiting for something or someone. The showroom suddenly felt different, its gleaming surfaces hiding shadows he had never noticed before. Somewhere in his dealership, someone was betraying everything he had built, and he was going to find out who. Ethan's heart pounded against his ribs as he meandered between the rows of motorcycles, maintaining a casual facade while his mind raced. The two customers had moved toward the vintage collection, their reflections visible in the polished chrome of a restored Harley-Davidson. One wore a leather vest over a white t-shirt, his arms covered in faded tattoos. The other was younger, dressed too expensively for someone supposedly looking for illegal deals: designer jeans, limited edition sneakers, and a watch that probably cost more than some of their entry-level bikes. "Man, these prices are insane," the designer watch guy said loudly, then dropped his voice to a ad. "Good thing we know better, right?" Ethan pretended to examine a Triumph Bonneville, angling himself to catch their conversation while appearing absorbed in the bike's details. His years of experience in the industry had taught him to spot potential trouble, and these two were setting off every alarm bell in his head. "Got the contact right here," Tattoo Arms said, pulling out his phone. "Guy named Ray's been hooking people up for months. Never had a complaint." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Ray Martinez, his warehouse manager of 3 years. The same Ray who suggested implementing the new inventory tracking system 6 months ago. The same Ray who always volunteered for late-night inventory counts. "How's it work?" Designer Watch asked, coming through a glossy catalog with exaggerated disinterest. "Simple. You pick what you want, Ray marks it as damaged in the system. Bike disappears during transport to the repair facility." Tattoo Arms made a quote with his fingers and showed up wherever you want it. "Half price, cash only." Ethan's fingers clenched around the Bonneville's handlebar. The missing inventory reports, the increased number of damage units, the discrepancies in the transport logs, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. "Sounds too good to be true," Designer Watch mused, still playing it cool. "What's stopping the owner from figuring it out?" A sharp laugh from Tattoo Arms stung more than Ethan expected. "Carter? Guy's too busy counting his millions to notice what's happening under his nose. Besides, Ray's got it all covered in the computer system. Swaps serial numbers with junked bikes, makes everything look legit on paper." The casual dismissal shocked Ethan. Was that how his employees saw him? Some distant figure too removed from the day-to-day operations to notice theft happening right in front of him? "When can we meet him?" Designer Watch asked, lowering his voice further. "Tonight, behind the service lot at 11. Bring cash. 40 grand for that Ducati you were eyeing. No paperwork, no questions." Ethan's mind flashed to the new Ducati Panigale V4 that had arrived last week, listed retail $77,900. The mathematics of loss crashed through his thoughts. Not just the stolen bikes but the insurance implications, the potential legal consequences, the damage to his reputation if this got out. "Hey, you need any help there?" A cheerful voice nearly made Ethan jump. Jessica had approached while he was focused on the conversation, her usual enthusiasm shining through. "Just admiring the classic lines," Ethan managed, forcing a smile. "These older models really tell a story, don't they?" "They sure do." Jessica launched into an impressive history of the Bonneville line, giving Ethan a legitimate reason to linger in the area. The two customers were moving toward the exit now, but not before Tattoo Arms made a show of taking Derek's business card. "We'll definitely be back to test ride some bikes," he called out loudly. "Got to shop around, you know?" Ethan watched them leave through the gleaming glass doors, his reflection a ghost among the motorcycles. The pride he'd felt in his dealership just hours ago had transformed into something darker. His sanctuary had been corrupted, turned into a front for criminals who saw his life's work as nothing more than an opportunity for easy money. A new customer walked in, and Jessica excused herself to offer assistance. Ethan barely noticed. His mind was already racing ahead, plotting his next moves. He needed proof, hard evidence that would stand up in court. But more than that, he needed to understand the full scope of the operation. How many bikes had disappeared? How many people were involved? Was Ray the mastermind or just another cog in a larger machine? The showroom's ambient music mocked him now, its upbeat rhythm at odds with the gravity of his discovery. He'd come here looking for customer service issues, maybe some minor policy violations. Instead, he'd uncovered a conspiracy that threatened everything he'd built. Ethan glanced at his watch. 2:30 p.m. 8.5 hours until the meeting behind the service lot. 8.5 hours to decide his next move. His fingers itched to call the police immediately to shut this whole thing down. But the investigator in him, the same instinct that had driven him to go undercover in the first place, urged caution. Rush this and he might miss something crucial. He made his way toward the exit, playing the part of the undecided customer to the end. "Thanks for all the help," he called out to Jessica. "I'll need to sleep on it." As the doors slid shut behind him, Ethan felt the weight of his discovery pressing down like a physical burden. The gleaming motorcycles in the window display caught the afternoon sun, their perfect surfaces revealing nothing of the darkness that lurked behind them. Tonight he would begin to unravel this thread no matter where it led. But first he had preparations to make. The local coffee shop 2 blocks from the dealership became Ethan's temporary command center. Settling into a corner booth with his laptop, he logged into the dealership's system remotely, a feature Ray himself had recommended installing. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Can I get you anything else?" the barista asked, eyeing his untouched Americano. "I'm good, thanks," Ethan muttered, barely looking up from his screen. The past 6 months of inventory records sprawled before him, each entry a potential clue to the scope of Ray's operation. At first glance, everything looked normal, but Ethan hadn't built a business empire by accepting things at face value. He started cross-referencing serial numbers of damaged bikes with their original shipping manifests. A pattern emerged, subtle but unmistakable. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, like clockwork, a high-end bike would be marked as damaged. The repair facility paperwork was perfect, too perfect. The same standardized forms, the same diagnostic codes, the same estimated repair costs. Real damage reports varied. Mechanics had their own shorthand, their own ways of describing problems. These were copies probably generated from a template. "Clever, Ray," Ethan whispered, taking his first sip of now cold coffee. But not clever enough. A new window popped up on his screen, the employee scheduling system. Ray had gradually adjusted the warehouse staffing over the past few months, ensuring he was alone during specific night shifts. The changes had been so gradual, spread across different departments, that no one had noticed the pattern. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from his security chief, Michael, wondering why he hadn't come in today. For a moment Ethan considered confiding in him. Michael had been with the company for 15 years. His loyalty was unquestionable. But the same could have been said about Ray until a few hours ago. "Sorry, feeling under the weather," Ethan texted back, taking a personal day. The lie left a bitter taste in his mouth, but he couldn't risk tipping his hand, not yet. He pulled up Ray's personnel file next. The man's background check had been clean, almost too clean. In retrospect, previous employment at 3 other dealerships, each for exactly 2 years. No criminal record. Excellent references. But something nagged at Ethan's instincts. A quick search revealed why. The first dealership Ray had worked for had gone bankrupt shortly after his departure. The second had suffered a mysterious fire in their warehouse. The third had closed following an insurance investigation. None of the cases had been linked to Ray, but the pattern was undeniable. "You've done this before," Ethan realized, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he dug deeper. Ray wasn't just a dishonest employee, he was a professional, moving from dealership to dealership, setting up sophisticated theft operations and disappearing before anyone caught on. A movement outside the coffee shop window caught his attention. A familiar figure was walking past. Jessica, the young sales associate, heading home for the day. She paused to check her phone, and something in her stance made Ethan's suspicions flare. The way she kept looking over her shoulder, her nervous energy. His fingers found the payroll records. Jessica had been hired 3 months ago, right after Ray had requested an additional sales position. Her references were impeccable, just like Ray's, too impeccable. No, Ethan breathed, his chest tightening. It can't be. But the evidence was there. Jessica's previous employers matched Ray's pattern perfectly, just offset by a few months. She wasn't just another sales associate, she was part of the operation, probably handling the customer-facing side while Ray managed the back end. The betrayal cut deeper than Ethan expected. He had watched Jessica with customers earlier that day, admired her product knowledge and enthusiasm. It had all been an act. How many other employees were involved? His cursor hovered over the security alert button. One click would lock down the entire system, freeze all transactions and notify the police. But years of business instinct held him back. Ray and Jessica were good, but they couldn't be working alone. Someone had to be forging the transport documents, managing the money trail, coordinating with buyers. The coffee shop was emptying now, the afternoon crowd thinned out. Through the window, Ethan could see his dealership in the distance, its glass walls reflecting the setting sun. The sight that had once filled him with pride now seemed ominous, hiding secrets in its shadows. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Meeting confirmed for tonight 11 p.m. Bring the cash. It wasn't meant for him. They must have gotten his number from the customer information card he'd filled out earlier. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. They were so confident in their scheme that they weren't even being careful anymore. Tonight's meeting wasn't just about one stolen bike. It was his chance to expose the entire operation. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was walking into. The sun had long since set when Ethan parked his nondescript rental car 3 blocks from the dealership. The familiar neon sign casting its blue glow against the night sky looked different now, more like a beacon for criminals than a symbol of his success. He checked his equipment one last time. Phone fully charged, small video camera ready, and a voice recorder running in his breast pocket. Just like old times, he muttered, remembering his early days when he'd work late into the night repairing bikes in his garage. Only this time he wasn't fixing machines. He was trying to repair the broken trust in his business. 10:15 p.m., a dark service lot, illuminated only by the security lights casting long shadows across the pavement. From his vantage point, Ethan could see the employee parking area where a single car remained, a raised black Honda Civic. The warehouse's side door opened, spilling yellow light onto the asphalt. Ray emerged, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. Ethan raised his camera, zooming in. Even from this distance, he could read the tension in Ray's body language. Something was off. This wasn't the confident swagger of a man who'd been successfully running a theft ring. This was the nervous energy of someone under pressure. A second figure stepped out of the shadows, Jessica. She was dressed in black, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a hardened expression Ethan had never seen before. The two engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument, though their voices didn't carry to his position. "Come on," Ethan whispered, adjusting the camera's focus. "Show me what you're really up to." 10:45 p.m., a white van pulled into the lot, its headlights off. It circled around to the loading dock, backing up to the large roll-up door. The driver stayed inside, engine idling. 2 more figures emerged from the warehouse, pushing a motorcycle covered in moving blankets. Ethan's breath caught. Even under the covers, he recognized the distinctive profile of the Ducati Panigale V4. His fingers tightened on the camera as he documented everything. Faces, license plates, the precise timestamp of each movement. But something still felt off. Ray's nervous energy, the extra personnel, the rushed movements. This wasn't their usual routine. They were scared, and scared criminals made mistakes. 11 p.m., right on schedule, a black SUV entered the lot. The buyers, the designer watch guy from earlier, stepped out alongside 2 new faces. They moved with military precision, scanning the surroundings in a way that screamed professional criminals. This isn't about a single bike theft, Ethan realized with growing horror. They're moving their whole operation tonight? His suspicions were confirmed when another van appeared, then a third. The loading dock became a flurry of activity as more bikes were rolled out, each one representing tens of thousands of dollars. But more importantly, each one was a betrayal of everything his dealership stood for. Ethan's finger hovered over the emergency contact he programmed into his phone, a direct line to the police sergeant he briefed earlier that day. One call would bring squad cars screaming into the lot. But something held him back. Years of business instinct were screaming that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. 11:15 p.m., a familiar car pulled into the lot, Michael's SUV. Ethan's heart sank as his head of security stepped out and walked directly to Ray, greeting him with a familiar handshake. The final betrayal clicked into place. Michael hadn't been ignoring the security breaches. He'd been facilitating them. The pieces suddenly aligned in Ethan's mind. Michael's access to the security systems, Ray's knowledge of the inventory, Jessica's position with customers. It was a perfect triangle of deception. Each person had exactly the access they needed to make the operation work. But why tonight? Why the sudden rush to move everything? The answer walked out of the shadows and Ethan nearly dropped his camera. Derek, his sales manager, approached the group with a stack of papers. Even from a distance, Ethan recognized them. The new digital inventory system contracts he was scheduled to sign tomorrow morning. The system that would have made their entire operation impossible to maintain. They weren't just stealing bikes anymore, they were running away and they were taking as much merchandise as they could carry. Ethan's hand moved to his phone, but before he could make the call, headlights swept across the lot, and a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is a raid. Everyone freeze." Chaos erupted in the service lot. People scattered in all directions, vehicles peeled out, and in the confusion Ethan saw Ray sprinting toward the back fence with a duffel bag. Without thinking, he gunned his rental car's engine and swung around the corner, cutting off Ray's escape route. The look of recognition on Ray's face as Ethan stepped out of the car was almost worth everything he'd been through, almost. "Going somewhere?" Ethan asked, his voice deadly calm as police sirens wailed in the background. Ray's face contorted with rage as he dropped the duffel bag, its contents spilling onto the pavement, stacks of cash bound with rubber bands, glinting under the security lights. "You," he spat. Should have known the great Ethan Carter couldn't resist playing detective. "Actually," Ethan stepped forward, keeping himself between Ray and the fence, "I was just doing some routine customer satisfaction research." You can imagine my surprise when I discovered such dissatisfied employees. Blue and red lights painted the scene in alternating colors as police cruisers surrounded the lot. In the distance, Ethan could see Jessica and Michael being handcuffed while Derek was attempting to explain himself to a stern-faced detective. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into." Ray's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "This is bigger than your precious dealership. We've got connections with the Golden Chain Gang." Ethan interrupted, enjoying the shock that flashed across Ray's face. "Yeah, I did my homework. After our little coffee shop investigation, your previous employers all had one thing in common. They were laundering money for organized crime through motorcycle sales." Ray's hand twitched toward his jacket, but Ethan was faster. In one fluid motion he swept Ray's legs out from under him, a move he'd learned in his college wrestling days. Ray hit the ground hard and two officers rushed in to secure him. "Mr. Carter," a tall woman in a dark suit approached, holding up an FBI badge. "I'm Special Agent Chin. We've been cracking this operation for months. Your cooperation today helped us crack a case that spans 3 states." Ethan watched as more agents swarmed the lot, documenting evidence and securing vehicles. "Months? Then you knew about the money laundering?" "Yes. The Golden Chain Gang has been using motorcycle dealerships as fronts for years. They send in teams like Ray's to set up the operation, then use the stolen bikes to move cash across state lines." Agent Chen's expression was grim. "What we didn't know was the location of their next target, until you contacted the police today." A commotion near the warehouse drew their attention. Michael was struggling with the officers, shouting accusations. "Carter set us up. He knew about everything. He's been taking a cut from day one." "That's interesting." Agent Chen raised an eyebrow, "considering we have 6 months of surveillance showing Mr. Carter had no involvement. Unless you'd like to explain how he was simultaneously running the operation and building a case against it?" Michael's face fell as he realized his attempt to drag Ethan down had failed. But it was Derek's reaction that caught Ethan's attention. The sales manager had gone completely pale, staring at something on his phone. Ethan nodded toward Derek. "I think your evidence list might be about to grow." Agent Chin signaled her team, and within moments they'd seized Derek's phone. The sales manager broke immediately. "The account numbers," he stammered. "Everything's on there, the whole network. Ray said if I ever got caught I could use it as leverage. Let me guess?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice hard. "Ray convinced you that I was the one behind it all, that he was just following orders from the top." Derek's miserable nod confirmed everything. The scheme suddenly became clear. Ray's team hadn't just been stealing bikes, they'd been systematically gathering evidence to frame Ethan if they were ever caught. Every transaction, every forged document had been carefully crafted to point to owner involvement, a classic insurance policy. This gang typically builds a paper trail implicating the dealership owner if the operation is discovered, Agent Chin explained. Most owners end up taking a plea deal rather than risk a longer sentence. But they didn't count on the owner going undercover, Ethan added, finally understanding why his disguise had worked so perfectly. They'd been so focused on watching for official investigations that they never considered he might investigate himself. Jessica was the last to be led past him. Her cheerful sales persona vanished entirely, replaced by a cold efficiency that seemed more suited to her real role. "You know what's funny?" she paused to say. "If you hadn't been so obsessed with customer satisfaction, we would have been gone tomorrow. The whole operation was ready to move, new identities, new targets, everything." "That's not funny at all," Ethan replied. "That's just sad." As the last police car pulled away with its prisoners, Ethan stood in his emptied service lot, surveying the damage. Agent Chin approached with a thick file. "We'll need your help documenting everything they stole. And you should know the gang might try to retaliate. We can offer protection." "No," Ethan cut her off, an idea forming in his mind. "I've got a better plan, one that'll make sure no one tries this again." Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number for his PR team. It was time to get ahead of the story. By morning, every news outlet in the Pacific Northwest would know how Carter Motorcycles had helped the FBI bust a major crime ring. No gang would dare target his dealership after this. It would be too high profile, too risky. "Mr. Carter," Agent Chin called as she headed to her car. "Just out of curiosity, what made you decide to go undercover yourself instead of hiring investigators?" Ethan looked up at the dealership's neon sign, still glowing proudly despite everything that had happened beneath it. "Because sometimes," he said with conviction, "the only way to protect what you've built is to remember how you built it in the first place." 3 months after the bust, Carter Motorcycles hummed with renewed energy. The morning sun streamed through newly installed smart tint windows, a part of a comprehensive security upgrade that had transformed the dealership into a model of modern protection without sacrificing its welcoming atmosphere. Ethan stood in the center of his showroom, watching a young couple admire a Triumph Street Triple. The woman sat on the bike while her partner snapped photos, both of them grinning with excitement. This was what his dealership was meant for: genuine enthusiasm, honest deals, and the pure joy of motorcycling. "Mr. Carter?" a familiar voice called from behind him. He turned to find Linda, his new head of security, approaching with a tablet in hand. "The quarterly audit results are in." Linda handed him the tablet, a slight smile playing at her corners of her mouth. "I think you'll be pleased." Ethan scrolled through the report, nodding with satisfaction. Every bike was accounted for, every transaction transparent, every security protocol followed to the letter. But more importantly, customer satisfaction scores had hit an all-time high. "The tracker program is working better than expected," Linda continued, leading him toward the newly redesigned warehouse. "Every high-end model now has a built-in GPS unit, completely invisible unless you know where to look. And the blockchain-based verification system makes it impossible to forge ownership records." They passed the service department where a team of mechanics worked in a space that looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a traditional garage. Each tool was digitally tracked, each repair documented with video recordings, each part verified through a secure supply chain. "But the best part?" Linda grinned. "Is what happened in Portland last week. Remember those copycats who tried to pull the same scam at Pacific Motors? They didn't get very far, did they?" Ethan chuckled, remembering the news report. The thieves had walked right into a sting operation thanks to the new inter-dealership alert system he'd helped develop. The warehouse doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing neat rows of motorcycles, each one secured with state-of-the-art locks. But what caught Ethan's eye was the group of people gathered near the training area, new employees going through their orientation. "Morning, everyone," he called out, deviating from his path to approach the group. The fresh faces turned toward him, a mix of excitement and nervousness in their expressions. These weren't just new hires, they were part of his redemption program. As he looked at the group, he felt a swell of hope. This was how he could give back, how he could turn his experience into something positive. "I'm sure you've heard," Ethan addressed them. "This dealership has a unique history. 3 months ago, we discovered a criminal operation right here in this warehouse. But instead of letting that define us, we chose to learn from it." He gestured to the modern security features, the transparent walls, the open layout. "Everything you see here was designed with 2 goals in mind: protecting our inventory and maintaining the trust of our customers. But the most important security feature in this building isn't the cameras or the trackers. It's you." The new employees straightened, understanding the weight of his words. Each one of them had been carefully selected from a program designed to give second chances to people who had minor run-ins with the law but wanted to turn their lives around. "Mr. Carter, One of them raised a hand, Jake, a former street racer who'd spent 6 months in jail for participating in illegal races. "I just wanted to say thank you for trusting us." Ethan smiled, remembering his own past, the mistakes he'd made, the lessons he learned. "Trust is earned," he replied. "But everyone deserves a chance to earn it." As if on cue, the sound of a motorcycle engine echoed through the warehouse. A customer test riding one of their new models. The pure, authentic joy in the sound reminded Ethan why he'd fallen in love with motorcycles in the first place. "Linda," he turned to his security chief, "what do you say we move up the timeline on Project Renaissance?" Her eyes widened. "The community outreach program? But we weren't planning to launch that for another month. Life's too short to wait on good ideas." Ethan pulled out his phone, already drafting an email to his management team. The program had been his passion project. A series of free motorcycle safety courses, mentorship opportunities for at-risk youth, and partnerships with local law enforcement to promote legal and responsible riding. The young couple from the showroom walked past now, proud owners of the triumph they had been admiring. Their faces glowed with the special excitement that came with joining the motorcycling community. This was what Carter Motorcycles was truly about, not just selling bikes but building relationships, fostering trust, and sharing the joy of the ride. As the afternoon sun painted long shadows across the warehouse floor, Ethan took a final walk through his dealership. Every corner held a memory, some painful, some proud, all part of a story that had made them stronger. The betrayal had nearly destroyed everything he built, but in facing it head-on, he found a way to build something even better. "Ready for the staff meeting?" Linda asked, checking her watch. Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. His dealership wasn't just secure now, it was thriving, growing, evolving. The darkness had been replaced by transparency, the suspicion by trust, the fear by hope. "You know," he said as they walked toward the conference room where his team waited to discuss the next phase of their journey, "sometimes the worst storms lead to the clearest skies." And as he looked at the proud faces of his employees, both new and veteran, all united in their commitment to doing things right, Ethan knew that Carter Motorcycles wasn't just back on track, it was blazing a new trail, one that would lead others toward a future where trust, integrity, and second chances weren't just words, but the foundation of something extraordinary.